Good morning, everybody, and hopefully, just to check, can people see the screen? One of my Oracle colleagues could wave or something if we can see the screen.
All good, Tim.
Thank you very much indeed, Jan. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to one of the Oracle Pi Days labs. We're going to be looking at some hands-on with Oracle DevOps, specifically around how you can accelerate your build and deploy into Kubernetes experience with the Oracle DevOps lab and the Oracle DevOps service. We'll be going into a little bit more detail about what that involves. And today we have a combination of slides, a little bit of demo, and some live hands-on lab that you'll be doing following the demos. So my name's Tim Graves. Just to introduce myself, I'm a cloud-native solutions architect, and I am part of the Developer Lighthouse program, which is in the OCI Strategic Engagements team. I'm based in the UK near London, and when I'm not working on computers, I'm a keen skier, though I may have a bit of bad taste in ski clothing, and also a very keen and unprofessional chef. Now, with me today, helping drive these labs, we have a number of my Oracle colleagues, who have very kindly agreed to help support these labs. So if you do have questions, please, we will be using the Q&A screens, and that's the Q&A function within Zoom. There is also a Slack channel, and I'll be giving you a link to that shortly. And from that Slack channel, you can also ask questions, but those are more general questions, and they are distributed across basically everybody who's doing the hands-on labs in today's Pi Day. So just to briefly introduce what I do, so I'm part of the Developer Lighthouse program, and effectively this is a free program for working with customers who are looking to build and deploy cloud-native proof of concepts and early-stage use cases. So basically what we do is we get involved in briefing your teams and management teams, helping train your teams, and also helping you deliver a use case and supporting you through that process. So if you do have questions about that, if you're interested in that, contact your local Oracle sales team, and we can help you with that program. So what are we going to do today? As I say, this is a combination of demonstration and I just realized this is in presentation mode. Okay, let's try that. This is a combination of demo and presentation sessions. So there will be a bit of both in play here, okay? And effectively what we're going to do is we're going to create your OCI tenancy. Now, this is a free trial tenancy. It's important that you do use the email address you used when you signed up for this event. And that will give you a free trial tenancy that is, I think it's $500 US of spending credits, and that's valid for 30 days. We're then going to use some scripts just really to accelerate things because, creating a Kubernetes instance is not what we're aiming to look at here in detail. We're just going to use some scripts that will run through a set of processes there. And then we're going to get into the bulk of the lesson today, or the hands-on lab today, which is around creating a DevOps project. So we're going to look at how to create a DevOps project. We're going to transfer some source code from a sample Git repository that we have into your DevOps environment. We're not going to expect you to create the code from scratch there. That's actually done by a script. And then we're going to create and test the build pipelines to show you how that process would work, what would be involved. Then we're going to look at how to do a deploy pipeline, and then how to connect your build pipeline to trigger the deploy pipeline and have the whole thing triggered by a Git commit back into your registry. So to track how we're doing this, we're going to be using the raise your hand function in Zoom. So we're going to be asking you a few times, have you reached the end of this lab section and so on? And if so, please use raise your hand in Zoom. And you can do that. I don't know how we do that. It should be. I'm going to have to work on that one, but we're going to be using that function. Oh yeah, so if you click on the Zoom menu, there is an option. It might be under the three dots saying more, which is raise hand. Okay. So first of all, we need you to have a free trial account. Let me go back to that slide. Just give me a second. Now the free trial account, I'd say this is free credits that you can use for pretty much anything within OCI. The link that you need to follow to get to this is bit.ly/free PiDay free-trial. I will put this slide back up in a moment, but let's just explain what this process does and how it works. So what this will do is when you go to this location, it will bring you to a page that looks like this. If you click the sign up button, you can see here on the lower left, it will give you a form. Now, I know it says it's only got $300 of credit here. Don't worry about that. That will correct itself once it recognizes that you are here for a enhanced free trial. You need to specify your country or territory. So that's where you currently are, your name and your email address. And it is absolutely critical here that you use the email address that you used when you registered for this event. And you have to have completed both stages of the sign-up process. So you may have had an email that was sent saying, please register for some additional swag. That is the stage at which you will get access to this free trial. You can do this lab if you don't have access to that. It will fit, you'll get less credits, and it will ask you to provide a credit card details. Now, we're not going to charge that card, but it's just to prove that we have identified you to meet various legal requirements to know who's using the systems, okay? But if you did sign up for this event, then you shouldn't be asked for a credit card, provided you completed both stages of the sign up and you're using the email address that you used in both cases. Once you have started that, you will then be given this little pop-up. It won't say sports event testing. It'll say something like Pi Day, and obviously your email address. So you just say select the offer, and you will then be asked to verify your email address. So what that does, it sends an email to the account that you've provided, all right? That can, on occasion, we have found, go into the junk mail folder. So if it doesn't arrive within a couple of minutes at most, check your junk mail folder to see where that is, okay? So once you have done that, then you will come, in that email, there will be a link back to another form. You'll be asked to fill in this form. We will generally generate most of the things like the cloud account name for you. So again, it should be pre-populated with some of the information. You'll choose your password and so on. The cloud account name will be generated for you, and you can choose a home region and basically choose anything that makes sense to you. Ideally, choose one that's geographically located close to you. So, if you're in Australia, you may choose Sydney or Melbourne, for example. If you're in Europe, in Germany, you'd choose Frankfurt. If you're in the UK, you'd choose London. You choose the region that makes sense to you. Okay. So once you have done that, then you will just need to supply a bit of address information. Click the confirmation agreement that you're not going to do things like run Bitcoin mining on this and so on, and then start the free trial. Okay. Now at that point, it will take a couple of minutes to run the free trial and to configure the free trial environment. You'll go to a screen, looks a little bit like this as it sets up your account. And then once you set up your account, you'll see a screen that looks like this. It may warn you at the top of this screen, but we're still setting up the account. Don't worry in that scenario. So what we're going to do, that is the links page again. Now, you do need to have a free trial to do this lab. You can, of course, sit here and just watch and listen to what we're talking about. That's absolutely fine if you want to. If you actually want to get the hands-on experience with this, you will need a free trial account. Okay. If you have already signed up for the 30-day free trial account, maybe you've been doing some of the other labs in today's Pi Day, then you can reuse that account, but just be warned, we will be creating a new Kubernetes cluster. So if you've already created a Kubernetes cluster, you're going to need to delete that existing cluster so that we can create the one in this lab. Okay. Right. So the link is bit.ly/PiDay-free trial. Okay. We will leave this page up. You can, of course, scan the QR code if you want to see that, though my general experience is trying to do this on a mobile phone is not the easiest. And we're going to give you 5 minutes. Sorry, we're going to give you 10 minutes to go through that process. So we can get you through there, and then we will be ready to start working on the lab itself. Now, if you have any questions, do please raise those questions. Oh, hang on, I lost the slide. Let's bring that back. So I say, if you do have any questions, do please raise those questions. You can use the Slack channel. Let me just put this here for now. You can use the Slack channel. I saw somebody saying this wasn't working. Okay.
Yeah, it seems the Slack link provided on the slide is not working. We're looking into that. So
okay, well,
if it doesn't work for you, please hold on. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, we will get you the right Slack link. And once we've got it, if somebody can message it to me in the chat as well, I'll update the slide. If you do have questions, please use the chat or the Q&A function. It's best if you can use the Q&A function within Zoom while we're getting the Slack channel sorted out. So as I say, we're going to give you 10 minutes to start that process. And the link again is bit.ly Pi-day free trial. There you go, that's highlighted. I also put that into the where's it gone? Into the Zoom chat, so you've got it in there as well. Okay, thank you. Ettore has just put in a link in the Zoom chat as well. So about 9.5 minutes remaining yet to fill in that form, get the email, go back in and fill the subsequent form. The critical thing here is please do remember to reuse the email address that you used when signing up for this whole event, okay? And you will need to have done both stages in that sign up process. Okay, so while we're doing that, we'll give you a little bit of background music. And let me just check. So, just looking at the questions. So there's a couple of people asking if you already have an account on the cloud. If you have an account on the cloud, you can reuse that account provided you have administrative rights to it. In other words, you must be an administrator on the free trial. And also, especially if that account is a free trial account, it must still be within that 30-day period because we're going to be using resources that you cannot gain access to if you're in the post 30-day free trial account. So I would suggest, generally speaking, it's better to set up that. Dennis, you were asking about ARM resources. So today we are going to be using generic resources, which is effectively the E3 shape. So that's an AMD-based shape. That should be available in pretty much every region. So there shouldn't be any problems with resources. We do actually have a script that will check to make sure you have the resources. Okay, Haned, we've answered that one. Right. Okay, so for the people who are commenting on missing Slack links, Ettore has put a link in the chat. I don't know if we can put that in. So that is the Slack link in the chat. So everybody who wants to sign up for a free trial account, that is currently the link that is highlighted on the screen. So that's bit.ly/Pi-day-free trial, all the same word. Okay. Right, let me just try clicking on this to see. Okay, I know some of you are still having problems getting into the Slack. I've just checked and it does work. You might need to sign up for a Slack account if you don't have one already.
Yeah, I tried the original link and it worked for me too, but of course I'm already a member, so
right.
Okay, because we're all a member of that Slack channel
right
now. So.
Okay. So today, we still seem to be having problems with that Slack link. I don't know if you can check. It's saying apparently we need to provide a new link. Action says if you can't get into the Slack channel.
Hello guys, this is Ettore. Actually, I shared the direct link. Please use the direct link, not the shortened link, the vanity URL. So I shared in chat a direct
That's
link.
not working either, mate.
Also that one?
The actual invitation itself that has expired. It's not the bit.ly link that's wrong. If you are a member already, you go in without a problem. But if you are, like our participants, new, then
Let me check again, please.
On Slack itself.
Okay. So if you can't get into the Slack, please don't worry. You can use the Q&A function in Zoom to do this. So you know that will work absolutely fine as well. And the team here will support on both of those channels. So you know, don't worry if you can't get into Slack. The important thing is at the moment that you should be working on signing up for the Pi-day free trial account. Now, as I say, effectively, to do that process, you are going to go to this link, bit.ly/free PyDay-free trial. You will complete the form. You will click the sign up button, and you will then complete the form. And I say it is absolutely critical that you do use the email address that you used when signing up for this event. Once you've done that, the system will send you an email. It'll give you information of the offer, and it will then ask to send you an email. So going to that email, you will then find in your inbox there's a link you need to click to validate that email address. That will bring you back to the web browser of the OCI page where most of the information should be filled in, but you will need to provide a password, company name, and choose a region to do the cloud work in. You'll need to provide contact details. This is to do with legal reasons as much as anything else. It will then go and create a cloud account and take you to that cloud account. You may be asked to log in again just to prove that you are correctly following the process. And it will give you a screen that looks like this. The region will be whichever region you chose during that process. And it may well say you're being asked to check something. So, Ivalio, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. Can you just double check that you are using exactly the same email address, please? If not, if you can just check with Ettore, who is the genius on those channels. So for the people who can get into the Oracle DevRel account, as Stefan says, please use the Slack channel. Actually, if you can please use the Slack channel pi-day-hol for this session. Okay. Right, thank you. Today we have a couple of people who are being asked for payment details. So if you are having problems, Ettore has put a second, if you're having problems signing into Slack, Ettore has put a second link
guys,
in there.
Please, if you can check this new link that I shared in chat. Thank you so much, and sorry.
Okay, so yeah, that one seems to work. Ivalio, can you message Ettore directly? He may be able to help you just check the email address, and if not, get your email address whitelisted, please. Okay, excellent. Looks like people are successfully getting into the Slack channel there. So there's a couple of questions. Okay, not sure if these are what the timestamp is on it. So can I edit my tenancy? No, once you've created your tenancy, the home region is set. Somebody was asking about using credit for the developer stack. So the developer is actually a free service. You only pay for the resources you use when you're doing build processes and stuff like that. So continuing to have the build developer projects is not going to be charging you resources. Things like the Kubernetes cluster that we'll be creating and the database we'll be creating, however, do charge towards those resources. Excuse me. And they also count towards your resource limit. Now, the scripts that we're going to be using today to create the Kubernetes cluster and so on, excuse me, there is also a reverse script that will reset the cluster for you and destroy it. and that will free up your resources. So if you are doing labs later in the Pi days, you'll be able to reset your environment so that you can then go and create other clusters and so on for other labs if you're doing those. Okay, so we are getting close to the end of that 10 minutes. If you have got to the stage where you have a screen that looks a little bit like this screen, then it may still say something like, we are still setting up your account. If you can, please raise your hand in Zoom. Now, the way you do this is, if you look at the Zoom control bar, there should be, if you click, on the right-hand side, there's 3 dots that say more. If you click that, you can then click the button that says raise hand. So I'd just like to find out who, or how many of you have at least got a screen that looks something like this, please. So if you've done that, if you could please raise your hand. Okay, looks like a number of you have. Okay, so we'll just give you another minute. Hopefully that will just complete that process there. And then we will start explaining a little bit about some of the DevOps stuff and how that fits together. So please, if you have successfully got your cloud started, it's set up to the extent that you've got a screen like this, if you can, please raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the 3 dots button and then just clicking the raise hand button. Okay. Thank you very much, folks. Okay, so please just check if you have got if you have successfully signed into the OCI tenancy and you've got a screen that looks a little bit like this, if you can just raise your hand in the Zoom, please, just so that we can see how people are doing. Okay, excellent. So it looks like quite a lot of you are at this stage. So it's going to take a minute or 2 minutes just to get to the stage where it's completed provisioning all of the resources. So while it's doing that, we're just going to do a couple of slides, and then we're going to go back and start doing the setup process. So what is the DevOps service? Well, basically, DevOps is it's like many things. It combines, technology, which is used to support DevOps. But the main thing about DevOps is it's like a model where your developer and your integration and your operations team are all connected, right? And the idea here is that by having these teams working closely together, to the extent that quite often the developer teams also do with the on-call side of things, so if there's an escalation or a bug, it's actually handled by the live developers, that you're going to have better quality code, you're going to have better quality releases, but also you're going to be able to respond and react to things quickly. So instead of having a separate developer and operations team, the idea is that they're brought together. Now, I am aware that there are some companies who say, right, well, this means we can get rid of one of these teams, and that is absolutely not true. You still need both sets of skills, you still need both sets of resources, but they're working closer together. You might not need as many managers, but you still need the people who have the hands-on experience. So the basic process is that the development team will take the input from the operations team, what should be happening, where things are going. They will use it to plan the code that they're going to the work they're going to release, and then they're going to do that code, the build and the test program. That's mostly the responsibility of the operations team, so the developer team. There is then a release process where the software is released, it is deployed, it's obviously run, and then it is monitored. And that feeds back into the planning stage for the next cycle. And that's mostly run by the operations team. But these two teams are integrated. People from both teams work in both stages. So as part of the development process, the operations team need to be involved to say things like, actually, that doesn't work, or could we do it like this to make it easier for the operations side? Equally, the developer team need to be integrated into operations so that they can respond to and fix bugs a lot quicker. And it also gives them visibility of what is happening. So to support all of this, you need a whole bunch of tooling. And there's also obviously organizational structures, but there's also a mindset structure about how this will work together. So these are not reviewed as separate teams. You quite often will use an agile development model here. And for a DevOps to succeed and to be high speed, you do generally need to have agile, where you make lots of small releases instead of a few huge releases. So what does that look like? Well, basically, companies, organizations that follow, excuse me, a DevOps model, they follow an agile type development model. They tend to make very frequent releases, but those releases tend to be a lot more successful. They don't tend to break. You don't have to back changes out. And the reason for this is because you're generally making very small changes, which means you can focus on that change. For each small release, you can check exactly what change has been made. So that makes it a lot easier if there are problems to fix them, but also to identify problems in the first stages. And also it lets you recover quickly from errors because if there is a problem, you know where that problem is because you know what was changed. Altogether, from a business perspective, that means those businesses tend to have a higher performance. They tend to be more effective. They're responding to their customer needs a lot quicker. So the DevOps model coupled with the agile development approach can bring significant benefits to you as your customers. Now, the OCI DevOps service helps support this. Now, it's important to understand that we don't do this for you. We can help support this. And the ways we help support this are in terms of delivering on automation, where we can implement some of the DevOps process and workflows. So that can automate the build, the test, and the release processes if you wish. It is a highly secure environment. A number of security problems have been where people have been hacked. And we put a lot of security in place, not just to protect the environment itself, but also to protect the results that you create, the code that you build. So we've got things like vulnerability scanning that can check for security and so on. Coupled with the ability for the DevOps code to automatically roll back when errors are encountered, that means there's less chance of security problems, and it means that if there is a problem, it can get rolled back quickly. It also means that we've got a full governance stack here so that we can see what's going on within the entire environment. Okay, so what does a typical DevOps system look like? Well, it will be a combination of tools like Git, a build system, a artifact repository system to store the outputs of a build, and then a deployment system. And that deployment process could be things like push out to a development environment, run a set of test and validation suites automatically, and then only proceed when those have been run. When that has happened, you can put it into your staging environment and do some testing. You might do a bit of canary testing there to see whether some basic loads have been done, and then approval and deploy into a production environment. And within the OCI DevOps service itself, we can deploy it to a number of our platforms. And those platforms are the software development environment of virtual machines, or bare metal, the Oracle Container Engine for Kubernetes, so that's often called OKE, and also our functions environment. So continuous deployment, a typical pipeline would be deployed to development, do regression testing, deploy to the staging, do a canary release, approve of that before it goes into full production, and then it is deployed. So a typical development pipeline will involve tools like release strategies. So you're going to be deploying this in a manner where you can do a test deployment first. Now, we're not going to look at that today. That's on our roadmap. We're going to expect to see that later in Oracle's current fiscal year. But you would typically do a trial deployment to see how that works. And again, we're in the process of providing tooling for automating that. It's integrated into your continuous build platform, okay, and your continuous integration platform. What that means is that, and this, by the way, today we're going to be using our DevOps platform, but you can integrate this into things like Jenkins as well, so that those can output and trigger run a build service for you. And I say it does include automatic rollback. In the case of the Oracle environment, this is a fully managed environment. So, we will do all the work of creating the build runners and stuff like that for you in the deploy environments. You don't pay for the deployment or the build service itself. You just pay for the resources it would use, like storage and compute and so on. I say we do have a secure environment, and you can ensure that people only use code that has been approved by you. And I say this is a native environment, so it is actually part of OCI, and that means by being tightly coupled, you get high performance and higher benefits in terms of reduced costs. So, for example, you don't have to pay network costs. This is available in every region that we have. Now, part of what you need to do here is you need to manage your artifacts. Okay. Now, an artifact is basically the output of a build stage that then goes into the deploy stage. Okay. And that could be, for example, container images. So we have something called OCIR, which is the Oracle Container Image Registry. This is a Docker v2 compliant registry. You don't have to use it. You can use any registry you want. For the lab today, we're going to be using this. You also have the artifact registry repositories, okay? And these allow you to put in basically any file that you need to support the process. Today, we're going to be using this for YAML files. And we can also do templates there, so we can do substitution of variables in that process. And we're in the process of creating a registry mechanism that will allow you to have NPM or Python or Maven repositories as well, so that you can then point your build process at those to ensure that you're only using known builds. The build pipeline process, which is actually what we're going to look at first, this was released in October last year, and this allows us to create and deploy a build process that will then automatically run the builds for you. This can be triggered by a Git commit. It will run a build. It can then go and test the software, running a test suite for you. Effectively, you have, this is a scripting-based environment. You can do concurrent runs, so you can have multiple people who are doing a build who are testing their own little part of the code. And it is a managed environment in that we will do all the work for creating the build runners for you for setting this up. The outputs of this go into the artifact repositories and can then be used to trigger a build pipeline. So the build pipeline process is a serverless process from your perspective. Obviously, there is a compute server. You basically pay for the resources used during the build process, but most builds are relatively short, of the order of a couple of minutes. It is a very flexible process in that you can basically define what you need for that process, and you can have multiple concurrent runs subject to limits. And it is a seamless workflow, and it will be integrated with DevSecOps, so it will do things like check automatically for vulnerabilities as part of that process. Now, coupled into this, we're using a Git repository called the Oci Code Repository. You can, of course, use external things like GitHub or GitLab if you want. Okay, and again, here, this is free. You pay for the storage. I think you get a gigabyte free. Because it is local physically, it's on the same network, so it is going to be faster. And you can have multiple secure repos if you want to. If you've got an external repo, you can mirror that into our build process. As I say, the pricing is really simple. You basically pay for the resources you use, but you get quite a high level of free resources there. And it is high performance because it is running locally. And lastly, some of you may be aware that we have another service which is called Visual Builder Studio. Visual Builder Studio is more aimed at SaaS applications, whereas the DevOps service is aimed at doing code building. Okay, so hopefully now you should all have got something that looks like this. Okay, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. Let me just go back here, and I'm just going to put the link to the hands-on lab into the chat. Okay. Right. So I would recommend, obviously on my screen, I'm also running a presentation deck. I would recommend that you set your screen up so it looks something like this. Oops. Okay, I'm going to have to log back into my Cloud Shell. Right. But yeah, if you can set your screen up so it looks something like this. So you've got the Cloud Shell on the left-hand side, and then, so on the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side, you have the lab instructions. I say the lab instructions, it is highlighted at the bottom of the screen here, bit.ly/pyday-2022-devops-hol. That is also in the Slack chat. So when you go there, introduce a couple of things, and then we're going to start some hands-on work. So first of all, there is in the Cloud Shell, if you see here, there's a little button. If you hover over it, it's called Cloud Shell, and it's got like a greater than and an underscore. It looks like a little miniature terminal. If you click that button, it will create a Cloud Shell environment for you. Now, this is where we're going to be executing our command line commands and accesses, okay? And this is basically a terminal that is running within the OCI environment. So let me just, okay, so the link to the lab is put back in the Slack chat. So let me just also put it into our Slack as well. Okay, so please, if you can open up your screens and set it up something like this. Open up a Cloud Shell. I've set mine to be quite large font, so it's easy for you to see what I'm doing here, but if you can do that. Now, whilst you're just doing that, I'm going to explain the format of the labs. So the labs, basically on the left-hand side, you can see there is an index, a little plus button. If you click it, it will open. And if you click the plus, it will open. If you click the minus, it will close each section. So this is the lab modules on the left-hand side. If you select one, for example, what we're going to do now is set up your core tenancy using scripts. It will open that page, and then you will see there are a set of tasks within here. Now, these labs are written for use in multiple ways, so people can do them without having us guiding you through them. So there's quite a lot of verbiage in here explaining what is happening. But let's get started and get working. So what we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to download some scripts. You don't need to check to see if you downloaded them already, because you won't have, because this is the first time you're doing the lab. So if you scroll down into task 1A, I'm going to do this and show you the process, but you can, of course, follow on now. We're going to give you a couple of minutes afterwards to do this as well. So first of all, we need to do a git clone, and this will download those scripts into your Cloud Shell instance. Okay. Once you've done that, just go straight to task 2, because you've already done task 1. And in task 2, again, you don't need to check whether you've got the keys, because we've already done that. So, or we know that you haven't. So if you go to the directory home headed on Kubernetes setup, again, you can copy and paste from these labs, and there is a script that will download step. Now, step is basically a command that helps manage certificates for you. For the purposes of this lab, we are going to be using self-signed certificates. And what this script does is it will download script from a web location, it'll unpack it, and it will create the root certificate for you. Then we're going, you don't need to create the root certificate, that's done, because once you've run the script, then go into task 3. So task 3, this is run from the same directory, and this just checks that you have enough resources. If you are running in a free trial account that you just set up, you absolutely should have enough resources. If you're not, then running this script will just check to make sure that you do have resources. It just goes and interrogates to make sure that there's enough virtual machines, enough networks and stuff like that. Now, I'm running in our Frankfurt region. You may see some slightly different numbers on the output there. Once you run that script, then lastly, you need to run the configuring the core environment in one Go script. Again, this is run from the same directory. And what this is going to do is this is going to create some basic resources for us. And then once we finish this, we will be in a situation where we have a cloud environment that you can start using and start building a Kubernetes cluster. So this is going to do a couple of things. It will ask if you're running in a free trial environment. Hopefully you all are. So check Y and press return. Okay, enter your initials. My name is Tim Graves, so my initials are TG. Okay, it then does some security checking internally, and will ask about creating a compartment. It will say, do you want to use for tenancy root? So again, if you're in a free trial, say yes. Okay, I will be reviewing these steps in a moment, so don't worry if you're not keeping up at this point. It will ask if you want to use CTD OK as a compartment name, type yes. Okay, the reason it asks these questions is in some cases, there may be people who've done other labs and be wanting to reuse it. Okay, so it's going to go and create a compartment for us. It will then try and do a little bit of checks. Now, in this particular case, there's just like a timing error on the script, which basically means it didn't succeed in creating a compartment before it went to the next stage. I discovered this last night. My apologies. There's a bug in the script. I need to fix it. So you just rerun the script again, and it will go and check everything. If you've already got stuff, okay, right. It's taking a little bit longer than expected to create the compartment. So we can see whether the compartments have been created. If you click the hamburger menu and type compartment, or start typing compartment and then go to where it says compartments here, okay. And then on the left-hand side, or in the menu, you should see a compartment saying CTD OKE. Okay, so right, that should have succeeded in creating it. The joys of doing a live demo and a live lab, unfortunately, sometimes things glitch. Okay, so right, successfully now it's now finished that process. So I say you give it a minute or two and then just rerun the script. It says, do you want to create a database? So you say yes. And again, it will go and create the database. It takes a couple of minutes to create a database. I think as somebody who's manually created databases in the past, I think the ability to have a database up and running in a couple of minutes is absolutely wonderful myself. Once it has created that database, it will then go and it will create a user in the database for you. So let's go back and run you through the process again. I'm going to again start a 10-minute timer here and then walk you through the process. So the first thing you need to do is you need to download the latest scripts. So that is in the set up your core tenancy using scripts. Task 1, download the latest scripts. You don't need to check whether you have a script or these scripts because we know you don't. So you make sure you are in the home directory, and then you do a git clone to download those scripts. Once you have done that, then go down and you can click on the left-hand side to where it says task 2, downloading the step certificate tools. Again, we know that you don't have step installed, so you can just go straight to the part 2A, which is scripted download a step and creating the root certificate. You need to change to this directory, and you need to run the script download step. When it's doing that, it will download the step command. It will create a directory for you, and it will set up those scripts. Now, Stefan, thank you very much. Stefan has put a link in here. Somebody's asking about what operating system. So I'm running on a Mac, but all of this work is being done in the OCI Cloud Shell. And that's important to understand. You're using all of the work you're doing, you're not running locally, you're just using a web browser to access the cloud environment. Within the cloud environment, it's actually running a version of Oracle Linux, okay? So make sure that you run these scripts inside the Cloud Shell, okay? This is very, very important. They won't run if you run them locally on your own environment. You've got to use the Cloud Shell. And if you didn't spot how you do it, to access the Cloud Shell, if you go to your Oracle Cloud environment and you click the little button, it's like a box with a prompt. If you hover the mouse over it, it will say Cloud Shell. That will open up the Cloud Shell, and you can see this below there, what that looks like. And you can run the scripts in that. Okay, so once you have downloaded script, then you can run the check resources script, okay? So again, this is actually run from the same directory, the same common directory. And there's a script there called bash check minimum resources, okay? If you run that script, it will just check to make sure that you have enough resources available. Now, hopefully for most of you, you've just created your cloud accounts, so that should not be a problem for you. All those resources should be there, okay? Then lastly, you're going to run the core environment setup script. Now, as I say, there seems to have been a change made in that this script, it will ask you, but once it's asked you if you're running in a free trial environment and if you're okay using the root tenancy, it'll ask you for your initials, but just put your initials in. In my case, that's TG, but you put whatever your initials are. It will also say, is it okay to create a compartment called CTD OKE? And again, you type yes. It should at that point wait for that compartment to be created. Unfortunately, it looks like there may have been a glitch or a change in the way OCI works. Unfortunately, things change all the time in this world. So it looks like it then immediately tried to go on to the next stage. If you get accept messages about compartment not found or 404, wait a minute and then rerun the script. It should at that point have successfully created a compartment. The script knows what it's already done, so you don't need to edit that part. Okay. Once it has completed that environment, then it will give you the ability, and it will go and automatically create a new database. Okay. So I say this, we'll give you about another 5 minutes or so. So hopefully we will get all of that. So again, I am going to ask people, once you have successfully created the database, and that will be a message, and it will say something like the database admin password is something semi-random that ends in secret in upper and lower case. Yes, when it asks you to use the root tenancy, just type Y and press return. In general, in these scripts, just type Y and press return. I know that people are going to say, why am I being asked to do this? This is because this is designed to be in a situation where some people may have already done some work in their tenancies already. So we have to allow for the fact that you may have created some of these things previously. So in general, just type, when it asks you a question, is it okay to do it? Just do Y and press return there, except when it's asking for your initials. So in that case, please do ask for your, or please enter your initials there. Okay. So all of this is documented in the lab instructions. And the lab instructions, let me just paste those into the Slack channel again and the chat. Okay. Right. Excellent.
Then there is one question on the use of the root compartment. Maybe.
Yeah. So if it's
explain a little bit there, yeah.
Yeah. So just to explain, so basically, if it asks you, is it okay to use the root compartment, just do Y and press return there. Okay. Compartments with an OCI are like directories in a file system. They're a way of organizing resources. Okay. So the root compartment is like the root directory in your operating system. So that's probably C: in Windows, or it's / if you're running Linux or Mac OS or a Unix-based operating system. And effectively what we can do is we can then create compartments within this. So for this lab, we're creating a compartment called CTD OKE. And by putting all of the resources in there, it means they're all in one place, so you can see them easily together, and you can delete them and we can manipulate them together, right? So what we're doing is effectively, it's almost the equivalent to creating a directory, but it's a directory for resources rather than for files. So when it's asking to create a root compartment, basically what it's saying is, we're going to create something, the parent is the root, and we're going to create something within the root compartment. And that will allow us to set up a whole bunch of secure resources and so on within that environment. Okay. Sakshi, yeah, so thank you, Stefan, for providing that. Okay. Yeah, Dennis, yes, absolutely right. Pressing all the way Y to the finish. For what we're doing today, absolutely, that's basically what we're going to be doing. However, as I said earlier, in some cases, people may have got other resources set up that they're reusing and things like that. So in that case, we need them to be able to use, you know, to say, no, we're going to be doing something different. Because we set this lab up so that, you know, what we're doing today is in a free trial, but it can be run in many other trial environments as well. So apologies, I probably should put a flag that just says answer yes, but I haven't got around to doing that. Okay.
Just to reiterate, this is all just to prepare for the actual lab that we will be running on top of this full-blown development environment that we're setting up right now.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. Yeah, so basically what we're doing now is we're creating an environment that you're going to be using to deploy systems into, okay? And I say, this is all scripted. I know it sounds like we're taking a bit of time to start with. It does speed up in a minute. Actually, if you're being asked to provide payment verification, you are not using the email address that you used to sign up for both sign-up stages. So if you can message Etheray, please, he can help you get your environment set up. So hopefully Esre is in this Zoom and will be able to support you on that. But actually,
yeah,
if you can...
actually, guys, I'm supporting already some of you on the Slack channel. I'm able to provide support through the Slack channel. So if you join there, contact me in private and I will support you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you are having sign-up problems, please message Esre directly in the Slack channel. Let me just put that slide up. Okay, the Slack channel. Esre, can you re-put the Slack channel? Okay, so yes, you are going to see a number of messages about waiting for the database to become available. It does take a couple of minutes for the database to become available. Don't worry. Once it is completed, you will see it will then say something like database creation, generated database password, and things like that. So don't worry. Basically, obviously we can't configure a user in the database until the database is actually up and running, which is why it's waiting for the database to become available. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. Excuse me. Okay, so if you have got the script running and it started doing the database stuff, if you can please raise your hand in the Slack channel, just so I get a feel for how you're doing on that. Sorry, not the Slack channel, the Zoom channel, my apologies. Okay. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so it looks like quite a number of you are doing that process. Okay, so whilst it's doing that, I'm just going to, whilst waiting for other people's programs to catch up, we're just going to do a little bit of checking, and then we're going to run a whole bunch of scripts in parallel that will get the rest of the environment up and running for us. Okay, so first of all, within OCI, to navigate, you will see at the top left there is this little window. Oh, sorry. Actually, if you have the Cloud Shell, you can minimize the Cloud Shell by the horizontal bar. You can maximize it with the arrows. Don't click the exit button because you're going to be using this a lot. So we're just going to minimize this. So if we look in the Cloud Shell, if you click the three bars at the top, you'll hear me call it the hamburger menu. Okay. And then first of all, we're going to scroll down to identity and security and then compartments. This is just showing you what we've actually done. So this is my environment. I did a test a couple of days ago, so that's why there's two entries saying CTD OKE, but this is basically our compartment. So this is effectively a list of directories, okay? Now, if I go to where it says databases, okay, sorry, Oracle database, and then click where it says autonomous transaction processing, you'll go, well, where's my database? Well, the thing is, remember what I said about compartments being like a directory structure, but for resources within the cloud. So if we click on the left-hand side where it says compartment, and then click, okay, right, that didn't go there, so I need to refresh that screen. Sometimes updating a compartment doesn't update that drop-down, unfortunately. So let's just go back here. So if I click where it says compartment, you can see it says CTD OKE, okay? And that will give me our compartment. Now, there is another tool called a Tenancy Explorer that will let you see what's happening in all of the resources in the compartment. But you can see here, I've gone into that compartment and it has created something called TGDB, which is the database that we're going to be using. Okay, so just a quick check. If you are at the stage where it's saying something like creating database and stuff like that, please let me know. If you had an error message and it said something like 404 not found, do remember, give it a minute and then rerun that script. You don't need to do all of the first entries that you did initially. It will just run through quickly and say that's already being done, and then it will get to the database creation stage. Okay, so if you have the script running the database creation, if you can use the Zoom raise my hand function, please. So you just click the more button and then click where it says raise hand. That would be appreciated just so I can get a feel for how you're all doing. Okay. Right. Okay. So, right, there's a fair number of you getting there. Okay, right. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start taking you through a sequence of steps that we'll use to create a Kubernetes cluster to set up some container images, and then get some initial services running. Okay. Now, to start with, so on the left-hand side of the instructions, there's a button there called set up your Kubernetes cluster using scripts. Okay. Again, you don't need to do task 1 because you already have the latest version of the scripts, because you've just downloaded them. So if you click where it says task 2, okay. If you're interested in how it works, by the way, there's these little expansions here. If you click it, it will actually give you a description of what the script is doing. Okay. And obviously, you can always look into the scripts yourselves if you want to. So make sure that you are in the right directory. Okay. So go to the right directory. If you restart the Cloud Shell, you will have moved to a new directory. It'll go back to a home directory. So, and then we're going to run a script called Kubernetes Setup. Now, this script will check to make sure that the earlier stages work has been done. Okay. And this will go and ask, do you want to use this name of the cluster? And the answer to that is Y for yes. Okay. It goes and checks to make sure that it's got all the right resources available. It checks if the cluster already exists. And then it will run through a sequence of steps to download Terraform. So this is, Terraform is, if you like, a scripting environment, kind of a scripting environment for creating resources, okay? So what it will do is it will download those elements. It configures the environment or the Terraform to create a Kubernetes cluster the way we need it created, and then it will start the process. Now, this will take a while, okay? Creating Terraform can take, or creating a Kubernetes cluster using Terraform can take around 10 minutes. We are not going to wait for that process to start. What we're going to do is we're going to just give you a couple of minutes just to start that process. So we're going to give you a 3-minute timer to start that create a Kubernetes cluster process, right? So this is pretty easy. You've already downloaded the scripts. So it is in the module setting up your Kubernetes cluster using scripts. So if you click on that on the left-hand side, once that has expanded in your instructions, then click where it says task 2, creating the Kubernetes cluster. Switch to the right directory. Whoa. Okay. That's not an error message I expected to see. All right. Okay, I don't think I have any clusters already running in this tenancy. Let me just check to make sure. No cluster there. Let's make sure I haven't got one running elsewhere. Ah, I have one running elsewhere. Okay. Right. Okay, so I have to do a minor bit of catch up. You should be able to run your cluster pretty easily. So
the error you're seeing is the error you would get if you would rerun the creation script in another compartment. So
correct, yes. This
is why at the end of this lab, if you want to join other labs that use Kubernetes, you should delete this Kubernetes cluster at the end, because you only have one count in a trial. In a proper tenancy, obviously that limit would be much higher.
Yeah. Okay, so it's going to take I'm going to have to be doing a little bit of playing catch up here as well. So I say you should not hit the error I just hit, because unless you've already set up a cluster, you won't have that problem. So I am just going to have to wait for that cluster to delete and then set up a new one. So we're going to be doing things slightly out of order the way I planned the lab. Anyway, okay. Right. Excuse me. So I say, setting this up, switch to that directory and run the script Kubernetes setup. Okay. So hopefully it will let me do this shortly. Now, what this is doing is this sets up a whole bunch of Kubernetes resources for you automatically, rather than you having to go and do this all by hand. Okay, Great. So hopefully many of you have now got that process running. Okay. Now, for those of you, if you've got that running, if you can just raise your hand. I know that the Kubernetes setup process will take a long time to run. Do not worry. We can come back to that and we'll check on how it's doing later. So if you've got the Kubernetes script running, don't worry if it hasn't finished. I just need to know if you've actually got it running. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, folks, for raising your hand. Okay. Right. So whilst this is running, one of the nice things about doing this in the Cloud Shell is we can do multiple things at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to run another Cloud Shell. So depending on your web browser, I'm using Chrome here. So if I go to where it says Oracle Cloud and I click right, and then it can say open link in a new tab, if you're running a different web browser, it might be handled slightly differently there. Okay, so that will open up a new web browser. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to build some images that we will be using. Okay, now because we have opened a new web browser, ignore the bit again that says download the latest scripts, just go straight to creating the images. We're going to need to open a new Cloud Shell. Okay. This is equivalent to opening a new terminal. We're going to go back to the directory, and then we're going to run a script called image environment setup. And what this does is it's going to configure some security controls for us. Yes, we're running in a free trial environment. It will create an authentication token using which is allowed to access it. If it asks you to save the authentication token, I would advise you to do yes. Otherwise, you will have to copy and paste it. It will have been shown earlier on, so you can see mine towards the top of the Cloud Shell. But if you save it, it will just save it so that it can reuse it. Otherwise, you have to copy and paste that when it's asking you for it. It will ask if you want to use a labs as a base name for a repository. Again, type Y and press return. Okay. It will go and create two repositories for us. So this is where the container images are going to be placed. Okay. And then it will automatically run through a sequence of steps where it will download the source code, download a Java runtime environment. It uses Maven to build our images for us. Now, this again takes quite a long time because what is happening is Maven is downloading all of our jar files. Okay, but it needs to run not only Maven, but it also needs to run the build and the packaging process. I'm going to expect this to take around 10 minutes to work, but once it started saying downloading, and well, you can see on my screen here, it's doing a whole bunch of stuff, we can just ignore that. Okay, right, I am still waiting for my Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so that's now been deleted, so let me just try and recreate my Kubernetes cluster again. Yes. Give me a moment while I just start this process off. And then we are going to start some steps for creating our DevOps lab. Okay. Right. Come on. Create the cluster. Okay. So that's my Kubernetes cluster creation process underway, as well as my build process. So we're going to open a third Cloud Shell terminal. Actually, let's give you, again, a couple of minutes just to get to the stage where you started running that build process. Okay, so again, to run the build process, open a new terminal or a new window. So you can, in the case of Chrome, you click right where it says Oracle Cloud and open a new tab. You can open a new window if you prefer. Open a new Cloud Shell within that. Switch to this Helidon Kubernetes setup common directory and run the script image environment setup. Okay. It will take a whole bunch of time as it's doing a whole bunch of builds and pushes and bits and pieces like that. Okay. Slightly worrying that it's saying that it's retrying online, but we'll find out. Okay. authorized. Okay, right. I'm just going to destroy everything and restart it. I did actually run through all of the tests on this last night, and it worked fine. So a little bit baffled that we're seeing some errors on this, but we shall see. Right. So I'm just running the reset script here. Okay. Okay, let me try running my image environment setup. Okay, yes. Okay, yeah, so if you do have questions, do please feel free to ask them in the Slack or the Zoom. Whoa. Okay, I don't seem to be doing very well today in my environment, which is irritating. So my apologies for this. It may be that I end up talking you through the process instead of actually being able to demo it while I'm doing it. Okay. Okay, let me just check that I do have my images set up. Right, so you can check how this works if you go to Developer Services Container Registry, and you should see under there that there are two registries. For mine, it's a little bit hard to see just because of the size of the font on the screen. Okay, so I'll say weird things happen today. So we're going to create, again, we still got our Kubernetes environment set up. We've got our container environment set up. So we're going to create another tab. And what we're going to do there is, just while we're waiting for those to do, we're going to just set up a vault and a couple of services that we need for the DevOps service. So if we're going to the DevOps service, again, on the left-hand side, click where it says setting up your vault. Again, go to where it says running the vault setup script. Okay. Now, to do this, okay, that's working great. So again, we need to change to a directory held on Kubernetes setup. And again, I need a new terminal in here. Okay, so I'm going to paste this. I know we're doing things a little bit out of order here, but this is just because we have to wait for everything to catch up. Okay, and then I'm going to run the vault setup script. Okay, and that's going to create a secure vault that we'll use in a minute for storing configuration information and so on. So again, you just type Y and it will go and create the vault and the security key that will be used to encrypt our configuration information. Okay, so let's just go back here and yep, the build process is still running for me and the Kubernetes cluster process is still running for me. Okay, so create a new terminal window. Go to where it says setting up your vault in DevOps service and then run the steps under vault setup script part 2 or task 2. And again, we'll give you a couple of minutes just for that to work.
Tim, one question. Do you know if the script is supposed to work in the Seoul data center? I think there's a limit. There might be a limitation for the VM images.
In which data center?
In the South Korea Central Seoul one.
I don't know. I've never tested it there. As far as I'm aware, it should work in all of our environments. It tries to check for any flex shapes it can get hold of. So those should work. Yes.
So the return image count is 0 for the VM instances. So that's why I was curious.
Is there anything else already set up in the tenancy?
I don't know. So, this is on our Slack channel, so I'm looking into it right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As far as I'm aware, it should work, but I've never tested it. I don't know if there's any resource restrictions in that particular region.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Again, yeah, this is busy working. What I've done is I've just run the stuff under the Vault setup script instructions. It will take a couple of minutes to create a Vault for me. So I can see that now my container setup script has completed. The Kubernetes script is still running. Okay, so we have to wait for that to complete before we can go and create our container, our test environment. Okay. Okay, so hopefully people have now got their Kubernetes cluster creation process underway. I'd say mine is still running. Hopefully your container registries have now been configured and the code has been pushed to them. And your Vault setup process is underway as well. Okay, so once those have been finished, we are going to do one more quick step, which is setting up our security environment for the DevOps service. Okay. Now let's reset that. So again, this is run by a script. Okay. So if you go to where it says DevOps setting up configuring SSH access. Okay. So if you click on that, if your cloud shells are all still in use, go and create a new cloud shell. You can reuse an existing cloud shell entry if you want, which is what I'm going to do here. Okay. And again, we're just going to click where it says running the security setup script, go to the directory it specifies, and then run the script bash security setup. Okay. So I'm aware that we have lots of separate scripts that we're sort of running at different stages. The reason for this is that this lab is quite modular and it's used, many parts of it are used in any of the situations, which is why we don't have one giant script. Are we running a free trial setup environment? Yes. What it's going to do is it's going to create what's called dynamic groups. And a dynamic group is effectively a way of identifying a set of resources. So it's going to identify things that are used for build pipelines, things that are used for deploy, and things that are used for the Git repositories, right? And it will then create policies allowing those to manage services. Why do we do this? Well, if you think about it, when you're running a build process, what you're actually doing there is you are creating something that will go and do compilation for you. So we need to have the rights to create those resources for you. And what this script has just done is it's set up the ability to run those rights. Okay, so that is the security setup script. Okay, right. Let's just see how the cluster's going. Okay, so my cluster is still creating. Okay, so what you should have running is you should have successfully run the core setup environment and created a database for you. You can check if your database has existed by clicking where it's on the little three bars on the hamburger menu, going to Oracle Database, Autonomous Transaction Processing. And then if you scroll down, you might need to choose CTD OKE in the list under the compartments, and you should see a database there. Okay. It will have set up and created a container registry. So again, if you go there, you click the hamburger menu, developer services, container registry, you should see again in the CTD OKE compartment, the container registries there. Okay. And it will also have, you will also have run scripts that create a Kubernetes cluster. Again, to look at the Kubernetes cluster, click the hamburger menu, developer services, Kubernetes clusters. Now, this may still be being created. And in fact, in my case, it is still being created. So that's, it's not a fully active cluster. Okay. And you will also have run the script that will set up a vault. So that's the script DevOps setting up your vault and configuring SSH access. Okay, so whilst those scripts are all running, and I know it does take a while for them to all run, what we're going to do is, oops, let me just find the right instructions. So I say we set up the DevOps security. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start doing some developer work here. Okay, whilst we're waiting for our Kubernetes environment to set up. So let's go and talk a little bit about the DevOps service. So if we go to the one marked creating your DevOps project. Okay. So a DevOps project is the environment where we run our builds. Now, obviously, to deploy our builds, we have to have a Kubernetes cluster running, and at least I am still waiting for that to be done. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the build service first, and we're going to start going through that process, and then we're going to come back to our Kubernetes environment shortly to go through that process. Okay, so first of all, we have to create what's called a notifications topic. Now, a notifications topic is a way for services to communicate between each other. Okay, so to do this, we're going to click the hamburger menu. We're going to go down and we're just going to type notifications. I can't actually remember where it is. If you just type notifications or start typing NOT, it will, in the search box, it will find that service for you. Okay. So this is under the hex section, creating your DevOps project. Okay. Remember to choose the compartment CTD OKE in the drop down on the left-hand side, and then click the Create Topic button. Now, name this, in my case, TG, so that's my initial, TG DevOps, oops, let's put a capital O, topic. Okay, I don't need to give it a description, and I'm just going to click the Create button. Okay, let me just shrink this down. So that's just been finishing, carry on creating my Kubernetes environment. Okay, so I'm just going to click, whoops. Okay, so, okay, got that correct topic created. Right, so actually, okay, all right, so created my topic, right? And you can see it's created something called TG DevOps topic there. No, typo, never mind. Okay, so now we're going to create our project. So we go to Developer Services and we click, you might need to scroll down to get to it, where it says DevOps Projects. Okay. And to do this, we create a DevOps project. And again, I am going to name this one. So this is task 2 in the instructions. I am going to name this TG DevOps project. Oops, got space in there. Okay, I'm not going to give it a description. I'm going to scroll down a bit and I have to select my notifications topic. Now on your screen, you should on your screen see a lot more than I'm seeing. I've got the font blown up, expanded a lot here. So I have to do a bit more scrolling than you will, but it will give you a pop-up and then you choose the compartment and the topic you just created. Okay, and then click the Create DevOps Project button. Okay, so that will go and create a DevOps project for you. Right now, it should take you to that project. If you don't, and by the way, this is you can do something similar to this on most things. You click where it says DevOps Projects. It'll give you a list of DevOps projects, or of course I can navigate to there by going to Developer Services, scrolling down, and then choosing DevOps Project. Okay, but there it has created the DevOps project for me. Okay, and then I'm going to go into that project and I'm going to click the Enable Logging button. Now, this is all documented in the instructions. I'll let you work through that in a minute, but you just click where it says Not Enabled to enable your logging. Okay, and you can basically take the default. So the compartment is CTD OK, take the default log group, it'll auto create one, and then just click where it says Enable Log. Right, it'll go and create that project. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes just to run through those steps of creating the notifications topic, creating the DevOps service, and enabling logging in that project. And that is in the DevOps, creating your DevOps project module on the left-hand side of the navigation window. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to run that process. Yeah, and thank you. Right, so Dennis, oh, thank you, Jan. Jan's helping you there. Thank you, Jan. Okay, right. Let's give us some music while we wait. Okay, so again, these are the steps in the Creating Your DevOps Project module. So you create the notifications topic using the web user interface. You then create the DevOps service, and remember to select the notifications topic you created, and then you enable logging in your DevOps project. Okay, right. So, Rashmi, I am just going to put a link to the instructions into the chat. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Sylvan. But Dennis, I'm pretty sure that the reason you're not seeing the cluster is you're looking at either in the wrong compartment. You might need to reload the page. Just refresh the page. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to catch up on updates and so on. Yeah, so Dennis, basically to see the clusters, you click on where it says the three bars, you go to Developer Services, and you click on Kubernetes clusters. You might just need to run through that sequence again, and critically make sure that your compartment is set to CTD OKE. Okay? And it should show you your cluster there. I mean, if it's successfully completed and renamed your cluster, the cluster should exist.
You can quickly show the search function, then that's another way.
Yes, sure. Okay, so we created a cluster here. So if I go and you reckon I can search on the cluster ID? Yeah? So if I click the search button, and then paste the cluster ID in there. Okay, I can't search on the cluster ID in my cluster. Space or anything? Okay.
That is something that used to work pretty well to find.
Okay, I was copying and pasting something incorrectly. If you search, you should be able to go there directly. Okay, right. But we've got that now. Oops, wrong button there. Okay, what we're going to do now, I'm just going to go through the process. So for the people who've got their cluster created, we're just going to show you a thing to check that your cluster is there. So if you look in the cloud show, it's like KUBECTL get space nodes, NODES. Okay, and you can run this after your Kubernetes cluster script is set up. It should come back with a list of nodes representing the cluster it has created. Okay, so you can do that sequence once you've created those that cluster and the script is completed. Okay, So hopefully, many of you, your cluster shell has completed, your dynamic groups set up, and you've successfully created up your images. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to upload our sample code into, or we're going to create a Git repository and upload the sample code into it, and then we're going to deploy using a script our starting point environment. Okay, so if we click where it says in the module, getting the sample code and uploading it to the OCI repository, okay, we are going to do a couple of steps here along these lines. So I'm just going to shrink down my Cloud Shell because it's obviously quite large visually. You don't need to do that. It's just, it's going to be a little bit easier in your environment. So I'm going to go to my Devops project. So that's developer services on the main menu and then projects. Okay. If you're already in it, don't worry, you don't need to re-navigate. I'm going to go to my project. So first of all, I'm going to create a Git repository. So click where it says Code Repositories. Okay. Click Create Repository. And I am going to give it a repository name. It is vitally important that you use the name I have given there. So I would suggest you do copy and paste, and that is Cloud Native Helidon Storefront. Okay. You can put some other text in there if you want. You don't need to. I'm just going to click that and create it. And there we go. Oops. Right. Okay. So once it has created it, what we're going to do, again, we're going to basically configure the environment. So this is the stuff under task 2 here, which is populating your repo. So again, I'm going to use the Cloud Shell for this. Now, again, this is something that, we've just written a script here just to speed things up. But you can do this manually if you want to. So you need to make sure you're in the right directory. And then you run a script that will copy all of the configuration files. Now, it is absolutely critical that you follow the naming scheme that I gave you earlier. So this will check for a project that is called your initials Devops Project. It will then look for a code repo called Cloud Native Helidon Storefront in there. And it will then say, once it's found those, are you ready to go? And you just type Y and press return. It will download a bunch of code. It will then try and reconfigure the Git repositories and get ready to push it up to a local environment. You are asked if you want to trust the remote service. You need to type yes for this. It's the only time you need to type yes, but unfortunately, this is coming from SSH, not my code. Once you typed yes, it will then go and do a bunch of merges and transfer the files for you. Okay. Once you've done that, you can then go and follow the settings in task 3. Just have a quick look at the code. So if you click where it says files on the left-hand side, and you scroll down, you will see your files. And you can click on the code here and you can navigate around it. And you can have a look at the files and so on, what it wants to do. Okay, so again, we're going to give you 3 minutes to run that script. Okay, but it is critical that you did set up the task names as we described earlier. So let's get that process started. Okay. Now, if you did use a different name, you can probably edit the name for the cloud repository name if you got that wrong. I think you can edit the repository name or the project name if you went. If you can't change the project name, sorry, you can change the repository name. Okay. So what we're doing here is once you've created the DevOps project, so you've created the notifications topic, you've created your project, and you have enabled logging. We're then going to go and create a Git repo in that project, which is called Cloud Native-Helidon-Storefront. Okay. And we are then going to transfer files over from an existing public Git repo to give you that startup point. Okay. And then you can use this to go and look in your code repositories to see what that code looks like. So, if you want to go and have a look at the Java code, okay. So it's basically an Eclipse project that has been stored in GitHub, and we literally just transferred it into our local environment. Now, strictly speaking, we can run our builds from GitHub and GitLab. There is quite a complex process to set that up. You have to have your own accounts on GitHub and GitLab. It takes a bit of time getting all of the tokens set up, which is why we're just doing it as a transfer like this, rather than having you build against GitHub or GitLab. But if your build processes do use GitHub or GitLab, you don't need to do this. You can go direct to GitHub or GitLab if you want to as a starting point, or you could set it up so that it would transfer automatically Git repositories from GitHub, GitLab into a local repository, setting the local repository up as a mirror. Any of those options are available. The idea is that we're trying to avoid you having to change your existing processes and tooling if you don't want to. So obviously you can do this, but if you want to carry on just using GitHub or GitLab to store your source code, that is possible. So the sequence of events here is you've created your project. We're going to create the Git repository. We're going to populate it by running the setup script there, and then we're going to have a quick look at the code using the user interface. Okay? If you're not a Java developer, don't worry, don't panic. The work we're doing here with Java is very, very small. So at least the editing that you're going to be doing with Java is very, very small. Right. Okay. So hopefully now you have successfully got that in place. And what we're going to do now is your Kubernetes clusters should have finished creating. Your containers should have been built. So we're going to run one last script here that will build our starting point environment for us. Okay, so this is the instructions in the install initial Kubernetes services using script module. Okay, sorry for jumping around. It took a little bit longer than I expected. So I don't want to have us sitting around doing nothing. Okay, again, you can ignore the parts in task 1 because you have already downloaded that. So you can go straight to task 2. So you open in the Cloud Shell, you go to a directory, any Cloud Shell window that's completed running its script. So you go to that directory and you will run a script called configure git and fully install cluster. I should probably make this a little bit easier. And again, you put your initials in there. So in this case, TG. Okay, because those are my initials. It'll ask you, do you want to proceed? So again, this is quite a complex sequence of steps. What it's going to do is basically create an environment within Kubernetes. So it sets up Helm, which is the Kubernetes package manager. It will then configure your database environment to use the database wallet that it would download when you run the database setup scripts. It will then create an ingress controller, which is basically a web proxy that sits in front or inside your Kubernetes cluster in front of your services. It then sets up a number of services in Kubernetes, including the Kubernetes dashboard. And also it will set up the configuration information that is needed to run the services in terms of things like the database password, the username. It will then start up the services, the related ingress rules, and then actually deploy the services. It will take, again, around 5 to 10 minutes to run this script. So once this script is running, we can just ignore it. At the end of it, it will go and, using the database information, set up some test data for you. Okay, so as you can see on my script, there's messages about being patient and various bits and pieces. Okay, just once it's started, you can let the script run. So again, we're going to give you a couple of minutes to do that process. To get that started, and then we're going to start actually looking at how to run the DevOps elements itself. Okay. Just a reminder, what you're doing now is basically running the instructions in task 2 of installing the initial Kubernetes service using scripts. I mean, one comment here. So you're seeing that we're doing a lot of scripts, a lot of automation. What's actually happening here is this is good practice, okay, to use an automated sequence of events. As a general rule, you don't want to go and manipulate stuff by hand in a cloud-native environment, because you're probably going to want to automate the sequence for a couple of reasons. It reduces human error. You know, once you have an automated sequence that works, you don't need to do any human interactions around that, okay? The other thing is that it means that it is fully documented exactly the steps that are happening. So if there's a problem, people can recreate the correct environment, or at least the actual environment, rather than what you think you wrote down 2 years ago when you initially set it up. So we would recommend that you always use automated processes. And this is one reason why the DevOps service itself is really quite an important process. By using an automated service, we're removing the opportunity for human error, and we're ensuring consistency in what we deploy into, okay? A lot of people will use things like Terraform, for example, as we have to create our Kubernetes cluster, rather than going and setting it up manually, where you could perhaps accidentally set up the wrong IP address range and find your environment won't work or it won't talk and so on. Okay? So we strongly recommend using automation and scripts wherever you can. Okay, so in my case, my setup script has just completed and it's just finished setting up the test data. Okay. Right, but now let's have a look at actually doing some of the work within our DevOps environment. Okay, so we're going to be doing the steps in the next task, which is examining and updating the Build Spec YAML file. Okay, so I'm just going to shrink this down to make it a little bit easier to see. So the Build Spec, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on this. Okay, but basically the Build Spec is a set of instructions that describes the steps to build an instance. So within the development pipeline, you have a series of steps. Within each step, within each pipeline, you have a set of stages. Within each stage, you can have multiple steps, and there's a build script for each stage. Okay, so if you look through it, you'll see that it sets up variables and stuff like that. What we're going to do is we're going to effectively run this pipeline, but to do that, we need to set up a couple of values. And specifically, the way we need to do it is we're going to be using the OCI secrets to bring in environment variables that will say where these values need to be deployed. Okay, so when we created this and we downloaded the cloud infrastructure, we actually set up a local version. So that Git setup script created a local version. So what we're going to do is go through that process. So first of all, under task 2, getting the values for the vault variables, again, there's a little script that will do this. So again, we need to change to the right directory. And what this is doing is this is creating a couple of secrets. It is putting the location of the image registry in there, okay? And it is basically going to tell us the ID information that we need to be using, all right? So again, just do the, you can explore the build spec if you want to, but if you look at where it says getting the values for the vault variables, okay, now, in my case, it's created a couple of variables. I am just going to copy those. So I strongly urge you to copy and paste these because you're going to need to refer to them in a minute. Get a new text editor. Okay, so I'm just going to paste them into my text editor. And what I'm going to do is I am going to edit or create a copy of the build spec. So this is task 3, updating the build spec. So first of all, I'm going to change directory to where the code lives, okay? And I'm going to create a new Git branch. Again, this is standard good practice. You don't make changes to your main environment. You create a different branch, you edit in a different branch, you check that it all works, and then once you know you're happy, you then commit that back into a main branch. So I'm going to create a new branch using the git checkout command. Okay, and we can check that it's there. Okay. Okay, and we can see that I've got now a branch called my lab branch. Okay, and I'm now working on it. So any changes I make are in that branch, not in the main branch. So I'm going to copy the build spec into the default location for builds. Okay, and we'll see how that's used in a minute. All right. And then I'm going to edit that build spec file. So, oops. Okay, and you need to scroll down here. I know there's an awful lot of copyright text and so on. My apologies for that. You need to scroll down until you find the line that says vault variables, and we're going to change those lines. And in the OCIR host vault, I'm going to use the OCID that the script gave me when it created the vault. Okay, and it's very important that you use the right OCIDs. All right, because otherwise you're going to get some unusual errors later on. Okay, and then I am going to change the OCI storage namespace vault OCID, and I'm going to put that one in. Okay, so again, those are the two that came out of the thing. Now you can use whatever editor you want. We've got VI, we've got Nano. I think Emacs is in here. I'm not 100% certain of that. So there's a whole bunch of options. But once I've updated those, I'm going to save the file. Okay, and that's created a new version of the build spec. Right. Okay. So I'm then going to make another change, and I'm going to edit the version number. So again, probably easier just to copy and paste this. So if I edit that file, and I'm just going to change the version number. So again, you need to scroll down until you find the version string in the Java code. And I'm going to change it to 3.14 because, hey, it's Pi Day, right? Oops. Oops. Okay, oops, wrong, helps you type it right, Timothy. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 3.14.0. Okay, just really to show that we have changed the version number. So I'm going to save that away. And now I need to do a little bit of Git work to change that and upload it. So first of all, I need to add the new file that I just created. So I'm going to do, oops, that seems to have lost itself. Where's that gone? Right, okay, so Git add dot, so that will add any new files in the current directory to my Git repository. I am then going to commit the changes to my local Git repository with a git commit command, and then I am going to run a git push command to push those changes into the cloud registry. Okay, so it will go and push it, and it will say there's a couple of changes being made there. Okay, so now if I go back to files and I click where it says main, I can see my new branch. So this is my new Git branch, and I can scroll down and I can see what's happening there. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes just to go and make those changes within those two files and to get those variables. So again, the steps that we've just done, you can ignore the build spec, exploring build spec. So execute the script where it says getting the values for the vault variables, and please remember to copy those two OCIDs that will give you. The OCIDs are the really long numbers. Okay, then go through, check out a new branch using Git, copy the template build spec that we provided to your working directory, edit that build spec to put in the OCIDs. So again, these are my OCIDs, yours will be different. Okay, so you need to put the OCIDs in there so we can tell the variables on the build system where to go. And then we are going to save those away and update the version number so we can see that it's changed. And then we're going to copy that file. And just to show you that the version number has changed there, if I make sure I'm in the my lab branch, Git branch, if I go to Helidon storefront, scroll down and go to source, main, Java. Yeah, there's quite a lot of navigation down there. You will find a directory eventually, which is called resources. And in that resource, there's one called status resource. If you click on that, scroll down past the copyright, you will find the version number will be the version that you set of 3.14. One other thing, just to let you know, what we're doing here is we're using something called GraalVM. So GraalVM is a Java runtime We're just using it in its pure Java mode, but it can support many, many other languages. So you can use polyglot languages. And again, we're not doing this here because this isn't a GraalVM lab, but one of the things GraalVM is very good at is it is very focused at helping you build highly efficient and highly optimized runtimes. Because in a cloud native environment, you want something that is very small memory footprint and has very fast startup times. And one of the things that GraalVM can do is it can build what's called a native image. And that native image is effectively converting the Java runtime. It strips out all unnecessary code that isn't used, isn't reached. It will then go through and it will convert the remaining Java bytecode into a native executable. And that executable is much, much faster to start up, like 30, 40, 50, 100 times faster in some cases. It also uses much, much less memory. The disadvantage is it's obviously native to the operating system and chip architecture, so you can't move it around, but it does give you a much, much faster startup time. And we can probably run another lab at some point with my colleague Ewan on how that starts. Okay, so I'm aware that we are close to our time limit, so we're going to go through some of these steps. The next lab, I believe, is in a different webinar. Now, one point here, I know that we may not get everything finished here. You can have access to this cloud environment for another 30 days, and you have access to obviously the lab instructions and so on. So, you know, if you don't get it all finished, do feel free to follow through and do that. Do those in your own time. Okay, so next step is creating our pipeline. So I'm going to show you this. Hopefully you've now all got your Git code or your updates pushed into the Git repository. So it's probably easiest if we just track along together. Ewan, thank you for putting the GraalVM runtime in there. Like I say, we'll run a lab at some point where we're doing that. So next project is creating a build pipeline. So we click where it says Devops Project, and on the left-hand side, we choose Build Pipelines. And this is the task, creating a DevOps build pipeline, task 1. Okay, so we're going to go through that. We're going to call our pipeline. So we're going to click Create Build Pipeline, name it. We're going to give it a name of Build Storefront, give it a description. Oops. And just click the Create button there. And then once we're doing that, we're going to go into that pipeline and click where it says adding a build stage. Okay, so we don't have any build stages at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a build stage. Now, you can have many different types of build stage. Generally, a build stage runs a script, which is what we're going to do to start with. So we're going to create a managed build stage. But you know, you can have build stages that work in parallel, a whole bunch of pieces like that for you. So if you've got like 10 libraries that you're building, you could have all those libraries built in parallel and then have a final stage that copies them all into the right place. So the build stage, we're going to call Build Storefront. Okay. Right. Again, we could give it a description. I'm not going to bother. The build spec path is where in the Git repository your build instructions are. So when we copied our template build file, we put it into a root directory. So that's where we're going to work. Okay. So we need to tell it where the source code is coming from. Okay. So again, we choose the type of OCI Code Repository, and then it will show up in the list. So if we just select it, and we're going to name this Storefront. Okay. So that we can tell different repositories in different locations in the build environment if we wanted to. So you might have other code that you bring in, maybe it's scripts or something that you're using, which isn't part of your source code, but you need it as part of your build process, maybe to run tests and so on. Okay. Right, so we're going to leave the timeout blank. Okay. And then we're going to press the add button. Right. So once we've done this, we can then start running the pipeline, which is in task 3. Okay. So basically, we just click where it says Start Manual Run. Okay, it will give us a form to fill in, and then we press the button Start Manual Run. And I know that it's a bit stupid having those two errors, things the same name. So what will happen is it now starts the manual run. So don't worry, on the right-hand side, this is the log window on the right-hand side. which is a black area. If it says start time is before end time, don't worry about that. That's just a timing issue as the log system starts up. What it's doing is it's going and getting what is called a build runner. Okay, now that build runner is basically the compute engine that will run the build process. Okay, once it's got that build process, it will then start working on the build. And it would seem that I have managed to put a, oops, what have I done wrong here? Commit hash, searching for build spec, build file not found. Oh, I know why. Because I copied the build file into the wrong location. Sorry. Let me just go back on that one. Sorry. Everybody makes mistakes when you're doing a live lab. My apologies. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my build pipeline. I need to tell it that it uses the right build here. So I'm going to go back and edit my stage. And oops, I needed to have selected the branch, my lab branch, in the code repository. Apologies for that. Okay, because obviously when I copy the build spec over, that's where I put it. Right. So I'm not following my own instructions. So the instructions there in the documentation do tell you to do that. So again, I'm going to click start manual branch. So we'll have another build process startup. So again, effectively on the left-hand side, it will show you the progress through the build tree. The center section is a bit more visual, and it says it's doing things like getting a build runner and stuff like that. Okay. And then the right-hand section is the log data, and we will see in there where our logs come in. Now, I suspect that this may be the last step we have a chance to do here. So please, if you get started on this, we're going to give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then I am going to just explain the process. Once you have done those steps of creating the build pipeline, adding a build stage, and starting the run on your first build runner. Okay, so actually we'll give you 5 minutes for that. Okay. All right. So once the build process is in progress, you will see it will go through a number of stages, for example, installing a local JDK and stuff like that. Now, it does take a while for the log system to catch up, because the log system only checks for new updates about once every 30 seconds. This is the web front end, so that the logs don't necessarily keep track with the build run process. If you wanted to go and look at that build that build spec .yaml, you'll see there's a whole set of stages, and the names for those stages map onto the names that are being displayed here. Okay, so as before, when we ran the Maven build ourselves, it does take a while for the Maven build to run. Most of that is because it is downloading images. If you had a local Maven repository, then obviously that would be a lot faster, because it wouldn't have to download them over the internet and so on. It's important to understand that each build stage, so the big stages, which is a build runner, runs in its own freshly created build environment. We do this to ensure that you have a consistent environment, so that you're not running in a situation where maybe somebody else has done something, and obviously that would be bad, because they could have messed up your environment, they could have left dangerous code in there and so on. But also it ensures consistency. And this is vitally important when you're doing this kind of automated builds. It's like the scripting environment. If you have a consistent build environment, a consistent build process, then if you give it the same inputs, you will get the same outputs. And that means that if you do have problems, if there are any issues, it is all reproducible. Okay. So in my case, the build process is still running. The window on the right is navigable. There is a scroll bar, but it's not very visible within that window. But you can eventually, if you look around, find the scroll bar. There we go. So it's got scrolling. You can download the text here if you wanted to. Okay. And if we look down, we'll see the outputs from the various stages. So in this case, we can see what it did when it started the build process. So the output line here is the first line or first few lines of the Maven process. In a short time, it will catch up with all of that log file. Now, it is possible to go and look at build histories. So this is a build run. If I go to my build pipeline, I can see where it says build history, and then that will show me a list of the build runs. I can click into a build run. I can see all of the log data that it's generated on that run and stuff like that. So again, you have the ability to go and see all of the history there. Now, there are many options that you can do here. You can have this do, as I say, parallel builds. You don't actually have to run a build process. You could have a step which is running a test suite, for example. If you're using Maven, Maven will check to see, or there's a test stage in the Maven process where if you run Maven test, or normally anything actually after build in terms of a Maven workflow, it will actually go and run a set of test suites against the code running JUnit test or whatever other test environment you've got. So if that test fails, then it will automatically trigger. You'll be able to see the failure modes in the logs, and therefore you'll be able to go and fix that. So again, this is all about automation. This is all about predictable environments to help you drive that process. Clearly, it is a very, very good idea to go and run unit level testing within your code, and something like JUnit, if you're running Java and Maven, is a very good combination for running that. But clearly, there are many, many other test frameworks for many different languages as well. So you can do that. So basically, it's now maybe not be very visible, but it downloaded an awful lot of Maven code there. So if I scroll in my log file, there we go. So I scroll all the way down to the log file. It will say that it has completed the build stage. Now, the outputs of this build stage are stored in the local Maven repository, so in the local build stage of the pipeline, so that when it comes out, we can then transfer them into other build stages. Now, I'm aware that it took a little bit longer than I expected setting up the Kubernetes environments and stuff like that. So we haven't actually got to the end of the lab. So my apologies for that, but hopefully this has given you a start of a feel of how the process works. There are a number of other stages here that will talk you through the process of updating it to output artifacts into specific locations in the container or the artifact repository. Also, things like how you can create your deploy pipeline and then how you can link all of those together. So I say my apologies, but we haven't finished there, but you do have access, obviously, to the lab content and also to the trial environment for the next 30 days. There is one point I do want to mention. As we saw earlier on when I was doing this, I had a problem because I had already created a Kubernetes environment. There are scripts that will reverse the setup steps that you have done. So the only one you should really care about is the Kubernetes environment. Okay, so if you are running your Kubernetes environment and you want to run another lab that also has a Kubernetes environment, you can reuse the cluster you have just created, obviously, but if you want to reset that cluster, then there is a script, and I will copy and paste. I'm sorry, I should have put this into the Slack, but basically, for every script that does setting up, there is a destroy script. The only problem is that the destroy script for Kubernetes internal environment is called reset entire cluster. My apologies, I should rename that correctly. So there is a script called reset entire cluster, but will effectively rebuild everything. And then you can delete your Kubernetes cluster by running the Kubernetes deploy script. You only need to do this if you need to create a new Kubernetes cluster. So Etere, I believe that we have, do we have any information on the next set of sessions? I saw that was something. Okay, thank you very much, Etere. You put that in the lab. So apologies again for not finishing all of this, and hopefully you will go and enjoy finishing the rest of the lab in your own time. The Zoom Q&A will shut, but we will be keeping an eye on the Slack channels for a little bit if you do have questions there. So with that, I'd like to thank all of my helpers. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for attending as well. And Ettore, do you want to just explain to people about the next session? Or do they go straight into it?
No, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.